Hello. Today's guest is someone who could only be described as a compulsive creative, a lover of nature, and in her words, the freak in the room, someone who has always sensed there was something more even before she had the language for it. As a child, she spoke with insects, felt the presence of unseen visitors, and connected deeply with the stars. Long before spirituality was a hashtag, she was wandering the aisles of esoteric bookstores in New York City, drawn to books that mirrored her own mysterious inner world. Through a life that's taken her from high-level advertising executive to becoming the world's first Chief Consciousness Officer, Lynnda Pollio has remained deeply committed to elevating human consciousness. Today, she continues that work as a consciousness doula, helping others navigate their own awakenings and spiritual transformations. We're thrilled to have her with us today to share not only her journey, but the 10 books that have marked her path. Lynnda Pollio, welcome.
Hi, Sandie. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here.
So tell us, life must have been a little bit unusual for you as a child, having all of this openness to everything and others not. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm probably not unusual for a lot of your audience who probably had these experiences when they were young, but I was a very connected child. I was always having experiences with beings that came into my room and being told it was my imagination and communicating with insects. And I was highly creative. And I was just kind of, I think, loosely tethered to the planet when I was a kid. Everything was magical and mystical to me. But it got crushed out of me because I was told it was my imagination. I was told I had to kind of fit into the world as it was. So, as I got older, I just sort of left it behind. At least I tried to, but I think these things never really leave you. You sort of put them aside until something activates them again. And so, yeah, I was an unusual child, and most of it I had to hide.
And an avid reader. So tell us, of all the books you've read in your life, and we all read a lot of books.
Yeah.
How were you able? What criteria did you use to distill your list down to just 10 books?
Yeah, it's hard, but I think it was really about the energetic imprint they made on me. And most of them represented a point in time that I was having some kind of personal transformation. And that book literally, in one case, fell in front of my feet or just appeared to me or really spoke to me. But I've read many spiritual books over the years, but these are the 10 that I think were at sort of certain turning points in my life that helped me navigate that turning point.
Which is just what we want. Those ones that stand out because they did just that. They changed your life.
Uh-huh. They definitely changed my life. They pointed
So,
my life in the direction that I felt I should be going.
yeah, yeah. So you're starting it with a children's piece of fiction, Slappy the Duck by Gwen Cooper, 1970. What is it about this book that earned its place on your list?
Well, I think as a child, because it's really a child's book, I think as a child, I resonated with the confusion and the lack of feeling like he belonged. It's a book about a duck who doesn't feel like he's a duck and doesn't understand why other people don't understand why he doesn't feel like he's a duck. And he goes out on a journey, searching for what he thinks he wants to be. And he leaves his family. He leaves his sisters who are off to quacking school because he decides he doesn't need quacking school because he's not a duck. And he goes off looking for himself. And as a child, I did not fit in. So I often went looking for myself in the woods that I lived around. And he goes off and goes in the woods. And over the course of the book, he finds 3 people that he thinks he wants to be or thinks that he is. And each of these people disappoint him. And at the end of the story, he ends up wanting to go back home. He has become wiser and more experienced and more knowing of why he did not want to be a duck. And he thought he wanted to be what he called a pussin. but he goes back home knowing that although he is a duck, he is different from the rest of his family, but he wants to be part of his family. He wants to be part of the uh, of being a duck. And I think as I was a child, I felt the same way. I was always looking outside of where I was because I felt like a mockingbird that had been dropped in some other bird's nest. And I had a real relationship with Slappy as to how he felt about how he was put into his family. And I knew it'd be a journey.
Interesting that he met three people. I mean, it's not like he wanted to be an elephant or a tiger or something, that he wanted to be a human being. But then
Yes.
he really embraced duckdom.
He embraced that what he believed the person would be was not what he had imagined, and that they had as many foibles and issues as he had as a duck. So he realized that there was no escaping the problems and the issues of being a duck. They just took different forms. So he was happy with being
Yeah.
a duck after that.
Hence that famous saying, you know, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck.
Exactly.
But
And
obviously a conscious duck.
he was more conscious at the end of his journey and more content with himself,
Yeah.
with being a duck. And I think that's what I was searching for as a child. I wanted contentment for who I was.
Oh, it's a shame it's not more, you know, I haven't heard of it because I think it's a wonderful parable.
It's a wonderful, at one point in my life, I wanted to kind of republish it and sort of maybe update it a little bit because it is a wonderful book, not just for children, but for adults about their own sense of self-awareness and their own sense of self-identity and how it's always in you. You may have to go journeying, but it was always there. You
Mm,
just have to find it within you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, book number 2 is quite different. Bringers of the Dawn, Teachings from the
Yes.
Pleiadians by Barbara Marciniak, published in 1992. And you say that this was a true awakening for you.
Yes, because like I said, as a child, I was having the word for it, interactions with beings that would come into my room at night. I don't know who they were, but some of them scared me. Some of them just I was curious about, but I was told it was my imagination and that I was dreaming. So, and I would have interactions. So I had never heard about channeling. I didn't know anything about that world. So when her book came out, I think I read it when it first came out. It was awakening that I wasn't the only one having these experiences, and that whether or not it was true, at least it was something that I could look at that had a relation to the experiences that I was having. So it made me feel less like a freak in the room. It made me feel more like maybe there's other freaks in the room. So it gave me a sense of security. And I read that book many times when it first came out because there really weren't that many books like that. That talked about channeling in that way. And, I had to accept the fact that this was happening to me. And that was also a very hard thing because there was no one back in those times that talked about this. And I certainly couldn't be speaking about it to my family. So I went through a lot of channeling books at that point, but that was the first one that kind of woke me up to the fact that, oh, there are other people that are having these experiences and maybe there's something to it.
Mm. Book 3 is To Be Healed by the Earth by Warren Grossman, published in 1999. This book has never appeared on the lists before.
Yeah, this book, I don't even remember. A lot of the books that come to me in ways that I either don't remember or they come to me because, again, it's something I need and they just appear in some strange way. And this was one of those books. And I've only had this book for um, maybe 3 years. And I found it in a thrift store. And again, it just popped out at me. And it's by a gentleman who was a I think it was published in the 70s, 90s. I don't remember now even, but it's
It
a
was
very,
90,
when was
it
it?
was published in 1999.
Okay, 99. Okay, so yeah. And it was published by a psychologist in the Midwest who had gone to, I forget what country, but he had picked up some dread disease. And when he came back, they told him he was going to die, that there was no chance he was going to die. So he decided to go out and lay on his and lay on the earth and ask the earth for healing. It took a long time, but he didn't die. And he slowly began to heal. And as he healed his body, he became super connected to certain energies. So he was able to take these energies and heal his own body and then help support the patients that he had. And so he wrote this book, and it's sort of part memoir about his life, but also part instruction on how to connect to the earth. And I've always had a lot of weird physical things wrong with me. I mean, that came with this package of energy that became my body. So I've always been looking for what is going on with me and how to heal it. And so this book really spoke to me, and it really helped me to connect to the earth in a more meaningful way. And so it's been very good for me physically. And it's just a book. It's one of the books I have in the house still that I just like having in the house. It's just, there's something about the presence of his energy that even when I touch it, I feel connected to the earth when I touch it.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, laying on the ground every single day, speaking with the earth. You know, some people might do that for a few days and then go, oh, well, nothing's happened.
Well, he was told he's going to die, and there was nothing they could do about it. So he figured, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die on the earth. And he just went out every day and started communicating to the earth and bringing the energy of the earth up and bringing his illness into the earth to be healed. And I think it took a year. It was not an easy time, but it slowly. And then as he became more healthy, then these energies started coming in that he was able to see other people's energies and auras. And so he was given a gift for all that he had gone through. So, you know, a lot of us that go through these kind of healing crises and have health issues are also, it's part of the process of the energies that we are bringing into the planet. And I think that was a big part of what he went through. And it, again, felt very aligned to where I was at the time when I found the book.
Mm. Book number 4. Now, I have a feeling this might be the. I'm shocked actually seeing this title, that this might be the first time it's been mentioned in 5 years. That's an awful lot, like 250,
Wow.
interviews and dedicated pages. But it ought to have been mentioned a lot more. It is The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, and so many people that I personally know have talked about this book.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised, maybe it might have appeared once, but it's certainly not been as frequent as it should be.
Yeah, that's another one of these books that happened at a certain point in time where it was kind of my second, my spiritual ascension or my spiritual expansion has been sort of like stages of a rocket. And every stage of the rocket came with different books. And I'd say that this was my second stage when I kind of began to understand what was happening to me and be a little more connected into all this. And I found The Science of the Mind, it's a thick book. And I'm not really a big, thick book reader. So it took me a while to read it, but it really kind of, for me, it was a primer on all different kinds of consciousness and spiritual concepts and ideas. And he communicates. I'm very big about languaging. Languaging is a big thing with me, and he languages very much in sort of a Christian or Catholic kind of way. And I was raised Catholic, so I understand that. But the ideas, that's just the way he languages. The ideas are universal. And I really found that he gave me, it was like kind of reading a spiritual encyclopedia, because most of the books I was reading up to that point were very specific, channeling, just all about specific aspects of my awakening. And with his book, there was so much packed into it that it was almost like an encyclopedia that allowed me from that point to kind of look in different directions that I hadn't been looking, because there was so much information within this book. So I think I read that book twice at the time because it is so dense. But it really kind of opened me up to other aspects of my awakening and other aspects of consciousness and spirituality that I hadn't considered before. So it was in its own way another awakening, but it was more like it was an opening to the second stage of my own development.
Mm. I'm very pleased to see the next book on your list. This is a book that several friends of mine regard as the only book we need to read if we want to heal, our wounds. And it is The Presence Process, A Healing Journey into Present Moment Awareness by Michael Brown, published in 2005. Incredible book.
Yes, and I found that one too, I think not long after it came out. And presence has always been a little bit of a problem for me because I'm always kind of half out my body all the time. So it's hard for me to meditate. It's hard for me to be present. So I was in a bookstore actually in Flagstaff many, many years ago. And I was walking in the esoteric book section, which I always do. And I heard a thump and I turned around and the presence process was laying on the floor in the aisle that I was walking on. So I picked it up and it was another big book. And because I don't like big books, I thought, oh, I don't really want to buy this book because and I read it, I started reading it, and it's a very dense language book, which is another thing I don't like doing. But it really did call to me. So I took it home and I started reading it. And what I loved about the book was it did help me become more present. But because I said I'm really into languaging, the one thing I learned, and he talks about in the book, is one of the reasons why it's so thick and so long is that he repeats some of the same things multiple times. And the reason he does this, and I'm very into cadence and rhythm of language, and because the way that you say something transmits information. So you could say the same information, but the way you say it will transmit different information and different knowledge in the unconscious. And so he was aware of that, which I found very exciting because I was aware of it. And what he does is he takes a concept, and through the course of the book, he will repeat it in different ways, 3 or 4 times. So it really gets into your unconscious and it begins to root there. So the ideas and the information that he's trying to relay to you actually take hold, because they are very kind of high frequency ideas. So that was an amazing book. And again, it was like exactly what I needed at that time, because I was going through a lot. I think I had started working on my book, and I think I was not very present because I was up in the sky, and I practiced his instructions, and it really helped me ground, which was really important. So that was, again, like a beautiful book at the time.
And I think he says in there that, you don't even necessarily have to do the process, just reading the words.
Exactly. Because the words contain the transmissions that are the energetic frequencies that embed in you, even when you don't need to particularly do the process, but the reading of it. And that's why I read that book twice too, because again, it's just about embedding the ideas. Words are kind of cathedrals for ideas. And so the words actually hold these frequencies, particularly if you're aligned with that frequency. And his book was very high, for me, very high spiritual, very, very, very high energy. So it allowed me to hold on to concepts that I really needed to hold on to, not in my conscious mind, but in my unconscious mind.
I love the idea of you walking along and hearing the bang behind you and turning around, and there's a book that's hurled itself off of the bookshelf.
Yes, it wanted to be heard.
You can almost see a cartoon with, the other books looking down and going, there she goes again. She's such a flirt.
Yes.
It's, it's true. Such a lovely visual.
Yeah, no, I love that book. But like I said, I loved all the books, and I think you love books when they meet you where you are.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough to find books that meet me where I am, because if you read a book and you're either past that point in your life, or you haven't quite gotten there yet, it's really hard for you to take in. You either kind of dismiss it as something, oh, I know that, or you don't quite understand it and you're kind of, oh, I don't think I really want this yet. But when a book finds you and meets you at where you are, that's where all the magic happens.
Yeah. Book number 6 is Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender by David Hawkins, published in 2012. This has been getting a few mentions lately. So I don't know if it's something that people are suddenly talking about and reading, but I think several people this year have mentioned this book.
Yeah, it's interesting because again, I didn't know David Hawkins. He lived in Sedona. He passed a few years ago, but he lived in Sedona, and I had heard of him, but I really didn't know him. I never read any of his books while he was alive. And this is another one that I actually bought this book because someone told me about it. And again, it was when I had moved to Sedona. I had left behind New York. I lived in New York for my entire adult life. And even though I'd been traveling to Sedona back and forth for 25 years, we came here during the pandemic as the pandemic was starting in March of 2020. And I left behind everything. I gave away 90% of everything I owned, and I came here with 4 suitcases as the pandemic started and sat in a casita for 9 months. So I had to let go of a lot. And someone told me about this book, and I had a hard time letting go of everything. And so I started reading this book. And what I loved about this book was that he not only gave you kind of permission to let go and surrender to things, but he gives you, again, instructions and exercises on how to do that. And saying you're going to let go and actually letting go are two different things. And we can let go with the mind, but it's really more of an energetic letting go that has to happen. And that I have a very strong mind, and my mind doesn't like to let go of things. It'll tell me I'm letting go, but then it's not really letting go. So I think reading this book, and you could feel what a wonderful human being he was in the energy of how his words are. So being able to take me at a very sort of fragile time that I was and help me let go while feeling that he was very kind in his life, because I could feel that in the languaging that he wrote. It kind of supported me. And when you're about to surrender and let go, it's really nice to feel a little bit of support, even if it's not from someone you know or who's even alive. But the book kind of did that for me. And this book I still keep next to my bed. And every once in a while, I just open it up when I'm feeling a little scared about the world or my life. I just open it up and I see what wants to reveal itself, because I think we as a species right now are going through a time of letting go and surrendering. So anything that helps us do that is really helpful. And this book has been really big for me. This is the most recent book I've read.
Mm. Book number 7, The 4 Agreements, A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom by Don Miguel Ruiz, published in 1997. And this is a staple of our top 10 list.
I'm
It's
sure.
always in the top 10, and for good reason.
Yeah, it is a primer on being human.
Yeah.
But I think particularly for those that somehow don't always feel so human, it helps us connect. Being impeccable, I'm all about having as much integrity as you possibly can. And that's not just about being honest, but it's about showing up as who you are and not bringing a mask to the game. And, his 4 agreements, no assumptions and no judgments. And these are primers on being human. And if we could all they're very hard to follow because it's really hard not to have judgment. And it's easier for me, I think, to be impeccable. But, some of his 4 agreements are very hard to maintain. Again, they're really good in concept, but the practice of them is not easy. But if we all kind of work towards that, we're going to make life much better than it's been. And I think that's why his book is so important. And I think really of all the books, I think that is one that everyone should read because it connects our consciousness and our spirituality to our humanity.
Yeah. When the kids leave for school and mum's telling them, check your pockets. Have you done this? Have you done that? Have you got this? Have you got that? Those 4 rules of agreement should also be part of what is being
Exactly.
told to the children.
It is just an instruction. It is a daily instruction to, are you doing these 4 things?
Yeah.
And not just for other people, but for yourself. I think that book is brilliant. And even just those 4 lines is something that I used to have. I don't have it now because it was in New York, but I used to have those 4 agreements taped to my mirror in my bathroom, so that every morning when I got up, I could just look at them and remember this is who I'm supposed to be. I may not be that all the time, but this is my North Star.
Yeah. So book number 8 is a very strange book, very short book, The Language of Space by Dr. John W. Weilgart, published in 1974. I don't know if I pronounced his name correct.
I don't know how to pronounce his name either. I found this again, and this is a book I found probably about a year and a half ago. I think it was right before I started with my frequency art, and I was in a thrift store, and it was there. And there were 2 books. I had 2 books from him. One of them was about symbols and what symbols mean. And I actually gave that book to an artist friend of mine who's a symbolist. But this book, it's called The Language of Space. And it's not that small a book. It's actually a pretty large book. And he has created a universal language that he wanted to be used. And it's all symbolism. It's all like I would consider it light language. I think it was the precursor to light language.
Really?
Because if you look at inside the book, the language is very light language-ish. And I haven't even had time or energy. The energy of it is so expanded that I haven't read the whole book. But it's another one I always keep in the house, and I just open it up and look at it because there's something about the language when looking at it. It's again not about the words. It's about.
So there's no interpretation.
Well, he does interpret it, but I haven't studied it. It is something that an academic who's a linguist might want to study, but that's not me. So I just use it as an energetic code. It's almost like a Morse code, but there's a lot of symbols attached to it. And I use it as a way of expanding my consciousness into other realms of communication, because that's kind of what I do, is communicate into other realms and listen to other communications from other realms, bringing them in. So I found this book to be like one of the most fascinating books I've ever found. And I just, again, open it up and take in the information and read little bits at a time. But I can't even tell you why. It's just something that I have to have access to. And I think it's helping with the communication I'm getting when I'm painting. And it happened. I found it probably about 6 months before the art started coming to me. So I think it has something to do with that, because like I said, it was the beginning of a new stage in my life. Again, like every book kind of begins a new stage in my life.
When I looked it up, it said that it's a short book. It has 54 pages, and it's not a concocted language. Wow. Well, maybe the version on Goodreads is a short book.
This book is out of print.
It's not a concocted language.
Yeah, this book is out of print.
It's out of print.
You can't get it. And so it's very it's a very unusual book. And that's why I like when I hold it, I'm getting all kinds of transmissions from it. Okay. So yeah, it's not in print anymore, and it's just found its way to me somehow.
Well, I don't know who wrote this description on Goodreads, but it said that it's not a concocted language like Esperanto. It's a rediscovery of basic categories of human thought.
Yes,
that's expression.
Yes, it's kind of, when you're looking at he explains what each symbol means, but I'm not going to study that. And I look at it as just a symbolism to the imagery. And there is definitely, there is a remembering. It's very universal feeling. You feel like if everyone could understand this, we would all be able to communicate telepathically to each other without having to actually use language and words. It's a remembering, but it's also, it's that kind of the thing that there is no time. Like, I think this is a remembering, but it's also something that we're going to be moving towards in the future.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Put it out there that a copy comes to me.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it. Yeah, I've never seen it anywhere before.
And it was in a thrift store.
It was in a thrift store, and I'm in Sedona, so the fact that no one else picked this book up, again, it was meant for me to find it.
Yeah. So book number 9 is really like the Four Agreements, and that it's always at the top of, alongside the Four Agreements on the top 10 of books that have been recommended over the past 5 years. And it is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, published in 1988. And again, it deserves to be in the top 10.
Yeah, and it was, I didn't read it when it first came out. I really wasn't called to it. And I think when I finished the draft of my book, and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I channeled this book and I had no idea why I was doing this. It was a novel, but it was spiritual. It had energy in it. And I had no clue. And I thought I had completely lost my mind. I literally thought I had lost my mind. So, again, this book appeared to me. And someone said, why don't you read The Alchemist? It's a novel. It kind of reminds me of what you're doing with your book. And this is years before my book came out, because that was the first draft of it. And so I read the book and I realized it kind of comforted me, because here he took what was a simple story, which is same as mine, a simple story, and he was able to embed energetic frequencies in this, so that as you are reading his very simple story, you are downloading transmissions that go beyond the words that he is that he has written down. Plus, he is providing these kind of universal life messages that are woven through the book that kind of affect everyone. So, I mean, you had the basic story, which could be any kind of story. And if that story had not had the universal life messages, and if that story had not held the frequencies, it wouldn't be the same book. But he was able to take these 3 threads, which is the story, universal life messages that we can all relate to, and certain energetic frequencies, and embed them and entwine them together. So the experience of reading the book, one, depends on your level of consciousness and where you're at, because you could just read this as a basic story. But you can also read this as a story that has messages that you can relate to, that make you feel connected to the characters. And then you can also relate to it as, if you connect into energetic frequencies, you can resonate with the frequencies that are part of this, and you can really get the full transmission that I think the book meant to bring into the world. So that was a powerful book for me at the time, because of where I was in my life.
Book number 10, Unveiled Mysteries by Godfrey Ray King and Guy Warren Ballard. Book 1 of 24.
Yes.
About Saint Germain.
It was about Saint Germain. And I had another book by him that I lent to someone, and now I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere. But it's where it's supposed to be, so it doesn't matter. But that was, again, like, I was in the midst of taking care of my mother. I was a caregiver to my mother for 9 years, and it was extremely difficult. I went through a dark night of the soul, scorched earth life experience, and at the end of her life, I was in a rehab center with her, and I was exhausted, and I went into the library, and it was a bunch of Nancy Drew books, a bunch of Women's Days, all these kind of just middle of the road kind of books. And sitting there was that book, which did not fit into any other book that was there. So it was, at that point, I was kind of like a starved animal, because I needed some kind of energetic spiritual connection, because I was in the deep dark of the medical system. So I took the book off the shelf and I started reading it, and it felt like coming home. And it was like, he writes it like it's a memoir, but it's way out there. It goes into ancient Egypt. It takes you on all kinds of journeys. And again, it's just one book in a series of books that he wrote. So there's a whole series of these. but it comforted me because I needed to go into that internal place where he took me and into this magic that he took me into. And again, that book held a lot of frequencies to it. So I asked the people at the rehab center if I could have it because I figured no one else is going to read that book. And they said yes. So I took it home with me, and I read the whole thing, and it helped me through that last stage of my mother's life when I had been so immersed in the 3D world of needing to do things and take care of things. And it took me out of myself into this other place where I felt more like me. And it gave me a sense of connection to these unseen realms that I had kind of lost connection to because I was dealing with so many responsibilities. So it was the perfect book for me at the time. And I've lent that book to someone as well, but I know where it is, so I'll get that one back.
Yeah, I'm going to read a little bit about the description because I think this is really important. It says, it describes an encounter between the author and Saint Germain, an ascended master, virtually a god, who is able to manipulate the fabric of reality. The author, Guy Ballard, using the pen name Godfrey Ray King, describes a series of astral trips in time and space with Saint Germain to lost civilizations in South America and the Sahara, as well as well-stocked bunkers of the ancients in the Grand Tetons, Yellowstone and Mount Shasta. The author and Saint Germain revisit past lives as citizens of Atlantis and Mu and turn out to be relatives. And a final chapter mentions encounters with entities from Venus. Wow, what a book.
I know. It's pretty out there, but there was something about it that I don't know. It just it helped in an odd way. It helped ground me, even though it's so out
Out there.
there. But
Yeah.
it actually helped ground me in myself while I was going through a time that did not feel like me. And it just was, and it was fascinating to read. It was an interesting, if you just take it as a novel, it was an interesting novel to read because it was like a travelogue. It took you all over the world to all these different places. And it was very, it's very visual. So when you're reading it, he takes you visually to where he's writing about. So that was a real kind of beautiful part of it as well. And it was really an amazing book for the time.
And we don't know whether it was actually a novel or real.
No, and I haven't really read his other books, so it would be interesting to read his other books and see, because I think it's a progression.
Yeah.
I think I had his first book, and that's the one I gave that to someone. And because I give books away a lot when I just feel like someone's supposed to have them. And if I get them back, that's fine. But if not, it's kind of like a crystal. Like I have these crystals, and then I would think this person needs this crystal. I give them the crystal, and it went where it was supposed to go. Yeah. So I feel that way about books too.
It was the only one of the 24 to appear to be available on Amazon.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, unless they're listed under different, different titles or what.
Yeah, I tend to. I've always found books. I've had other books too that also are kind of out of print. I've always found these kind of arcane, out of print books tend to find me. I've had other ones, but I don't remember what they were now because particularly early on when I was reading the channeling books, I would just find these old books that came out of nowhere and I'd read them. But at the time, I just was reading them and then I'd give them to someone and I kind of lost track of them. And I don't even remember what they were anymore. Yeah. But I love finding books that have kind of lost their way in the world and helping to bring those energies and those ideas back, even if it's just through me.
Yeah. Yeah. Lost their way. That's a great term. Makes me think, now of the book, the bookshops and the libraries being an orphanage.
Exactly.
And these books are just waiting to find a new home.
Exactly. And I think books are like that. they seek out the people
Yes.
that require, and you just have to keep open to it. And they seek out the people that will benefit from what they have to say. And like I said, I could have left that book laying on the floor, The Presence Process, because I didn't want to read it. It was just too much. But I knew I was supposed to read it. So I took up the challenge. And I think, I think that's how books are too. We could say no, and it'll just move on to someone else.
Well, that is your 10 best books. Let's talk a little bit about you and your own book. First of all, I have to ask you, the world's first chief consciousness officer for a global futurist marketing consultancy.
Mm-hmm.
What did that role entail?
Well, I mean, I had been in advertising, running new business for ad agencies for a bunch of years. So I was a corporate person, even though I always was kind of the freak in the room, because I was always very energy conscious. But when I came to Sedona the first time in 1996, when I had all these kind of I would say spiritual reawakenings from my childhood. So when I went back to New York, I could not go back into advertising the same way. And I really became immersed in consciousness and immersed in conscious business practices. And after, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years of doing that for small companies, I wanted to bring the idea of a chief consciousness officer into corporate America, because just as when digital technologies kind of took hold and no one understood anything about them, companies had to hire a chief technology officer, someone who understood those frequencies, understood that technology, so they could bring that into their companies and to their consumer and all that. And I said, well, consciousness is a human technology that's beginning to come in. This is many years ago now, beginning to come into the world. And companies will need someone who understands those human technologies, which I said were wisdom, intuition, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and gratitude. And we'll need someone who understands those and how they can benefit not just the company, but all the constituents, the partners, the consumers, everyone. So that would be a chief consciousness officer. And so I tried to get an agency to hire me for probably 10 years. And no one quite understood. And then I found a futurist who had a global marketing company, and she agreed to hire me. I was doing new business as well, but it allowed me to bring these concepts that had been coming into me for probably 20 years at that point, into corporations. So I was able to meet with the CEOs and CMOs of Fortune 100 companies and educate them to what I saw as the global transformation that was coming, and why consciousness was going to be such an important part of this transformation, and how important it would be for companies to understand it and be able to navigate it from that perspective. But yeah, that's how that got started. And so I finally got to do it after 10 years, and stayed with it for about a couple of years, but then I moved on.
So tell us a bit about your book, Trust in the Currents. It's a really fascinating book. I've read it, and it stood out as something quite original. This was channeled, as you said before, completely channeled. It kind of came through you.
Completely channeled.
Do we know whether Addie May existed?
Well, I mean, it started coming to me when I was involved in conscious business practices. I was working in New York, and I said I have channeled what I would consider high knowledge my entire life. It doesn't come in as a voice. It always came in as just a download of knowing something. And that's gone on forever. But this was an actual voice. And I was working on my computer one day, working on a project, and I heard this old Black Southern woman standing next to me. And her first words were, "It's not what happened to me that matters." And I had never heard a voice like that before. And so it kind of shook me a little bit. And then I allowed her to keep talking. And I probably wrote 2 or 3 paragraphs. And it became the first 2 or 3 paragraphs of her story. And then she left. And I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. And then I went back to my work. And 3 or 4 days later, I felt her presence again. And she started speaking again. So I had to accept this covenant. And then once I accepted it, what would happen was I would feel her presence. I would call it the indigo abyss. I would feel her presence. I had to sit and wait for her to come in, and it felt kind of like a cold energy until she connected, and then it was like a warm flow. And it was stream of consciousness. I never knew what I was writing until I was writing it. And it took me 2 years to channel the first draft. And it came out in very heavy Southern Black dialect, which is how I heard it. And it took me another 8 years to edit it, but that's a whole nother story. And I couldn't get her name in the beginning. She gave me Aubrey, which is her last name, right away, and she gave me all the other characters, but she wouldn't give me her first name. So for the first year, I kept changing the title. I kept changing her name until I saw it was the anniversary of the Birmingham church bombings that killed the 4 little girls. And as soon as I saw the photograph of Addie Mae Collins, I just had this shock of lightning saying that's her name. So I called her Addie Mae. And for the rest of the time I wrote the book, I had a photograph of Addie Mae Collins taped to my computer. So I don't feel like she was Addie Mae, because Addie Mae died when she was, I think, 11 or 12 years old. And this character goes from the time she's 11 to the time she's 18. But there was something about the influence of her energy that wanted to be, it was almost like, I'm sorry, I sometimes cry when I say this. I don't know why. Because I felt such a responsibility to her, but it was about giving her a life that she didn't have. And I felt like the whole time I was writing it, that I was giving her and even the other 3 little girls a life that they didn't have. And I felt that she was present in some way coming through this other voice. And I don't know who that voice was. It was very, very clear. And I don't know who that was, but the minute I finished channeling the book, which was a 2-year period, and I started the channeling in New York. I finished it in Sedona, and a lot of the nature that's in the book, which is another character in the book, all were my experiences here in Sedona. And when I was done, when I wrote the last word, I knew it was the last word. And I felt her leave. I literally felt her presence leave. And I never felt her the same again. I used to get her while I was editing it, and I was totally freaked out because it took me 8 years and I didn't know what I was doing, because she taught me how to write. Addie Mae taught me how to write. I was not a writer before I wrote this book. And while I was going through the editing, I would be afraid and I would hear her laughing at me. And when I was a child, I used to find baby birds that fell out of nests, and I would raise them until they flew away. And what they would do is, after a while, they would fly away and they wouldn't come to me. But if I called to them, they'd chirp. And I would feel that she was chirping. Like I would feel like her energy was letting me know she was there, but she never came back to me in the same way again. She moved on to wherever. So I don't know who she was. That was just my experience with her. And I've never had an experience with a voice like that since. It was a one-time thing, but I know we had some kind of contract. And I used to ask her all the time, why me? Because here I was, this middle-aged white woman from New York, writing about a young Southern girl. I knew it wasn't going to be accepted very much in the beginning, at least. And she always said that's why. First, to show what 2 women can accomplish when they share the same compassionate spirit, and also to celebrate our differences, that it's by coming together that we create the most beautiful things. So she really gave me a lot. She's probably been the most influential person in my life, even though she didn't really exist as a real life.
Well, you write very, very beautifully, very engagingly. It's the sort of book that you really do want to keep reading. And there's definitely an energy in there.
Yes.
There is an energy. You can feel her energy. So it does feel like something quite unusual in my experience, and unforgettable too.
Well, it's funny because when I was editing it, one of the reasons why it took me 8 years to edit it was that I would work on one sentence for 3 or 4 hours because I had to have the cadence. There are energetic frequencies embedded in some of these sentences that bring the reader into their heart. And the only way to do that was to arrange the rhythm and the cadence of the words in a certain way. And I always tell people, if you really get touched by something, read it out loud. And I've had a lot of people, like husbands and wives and mothers and daughters, read the book aloud to each other. And it brings a whole nother level of energetic frequency to the book. But it's been great.
Won awards.
Yeah, it's won 13 literary awards, and it was #1 in inspirational fiction on Amazon.
Yeah,
So
well
it's been,
done.
it's had a life of its own, and it's really not because of me, because the book came out as I was taking care of my mother. So I didn't really promote the book at all. I entered a bunch of awards over a 2-year period, but I had no time. So she kind of took it, and it's been several years now, but she still keeps going. The people that are meant to read her words will find her book.
Do you miss her?
I miss her wisdom. She used to laugh at me when I was afraid. She thought fear was hysterical. She thought human fear was really funny. And so, I wrote like that, maybe without fear, there'd be no flower, because she seemed to indicate that fear actually brings us to a place that allows us to blossom and allows us to create, it kind of fertilizes us in a way that allows us to get to places that we wouldn't get to without fear bringing us there. Our humanness doesn't like it, but there's a part of our soul, I think, that really kind of grows from the experience. So I miss her because, and it was really funny because when I went back to New York after channeling this, it was all African American characters in this book. And I remember when I first got back and I'd walk by a cafe and I'd see these African American friends, women sitting together laughing. I would plow my nose up to the window and I would get this deep desire to sit down with them and connect with them, because when I left, when I lost Addie Mae, I lost her whole family. I lost Mama. I lost Jenny. I lost Clarice. I lost all these beautiful female Black characters that I had become very, very close to over a 10-year period of writing the book. And, so that part was hard for me. But, when you're called to do something, you just sort of do it, and you trust the currents.
Did you ever wonder whether Addie Mae was former personality?
Yes,
Right.
I would have loved to know that. And it's funny because when I was writing it and people would say, well, where is this? I'd say, well, it's in the South. I said, where is it? And every time I would try to put in, you know, Georgia or Mississippi, or she'd always have me take it out. And I didn't know why. And everyone kept saying, you're being too vague. But what I found is, since the book came out, people that are in Mississippi have contacted me and say, I know this place in Mississippi. People in Georgia say, oh, this is the town that my grandmother was. So she wrote in a way that allows individuals to connect to her energy, to her experience as it's their own. Yes. And the same thing with the time. Like for me, the only thing that sets the tone for the time in the book is there is one sentence where she talks about a pig named Franklin who is going to feed a lot of hungry mouths. And so Franklin Roosevelt, so for me, that's why it was set in the late 30s, early 40s, was because Franklin Roosevelt was the one that opened up the ability for people to get access to money and to compassion. And so that was what that pig was going to do. But otherwise, I've had people think it's set in the 50s, set in the 60s, and it's fine with me, because she is connecting to each individual person who reads the book. And it's not up to me to tell them where it is. In fact, when I had Kirkus, which is a big book review company, when they reviewed the book, they compared it to Beloved and The Color Purple, and they said it was beautiful. They called it a memoir. Mm. And I called them and I said, thank you for the review. It was a beautiful review, but it's fiction. It says on the cover, fiction. And I said, can you change it? They said, no, because the reviewer reviewed it and felt it as a memoir. And yes, it has my story at the beginning of the end, the epilogue and the prologue, which tells me how the book came to me and then what I learned from the book. But because it's first person narrative, she read it as a memoir. So I love that everyone connects to this book in their own personal ways.
Yeah, it's definitely one worth spending your money on.
Oh, thank you.
We've only got a few minutes left. Tell me about Wisdom Keeping. That's your website.
That's my website. I am in the process of transformation right now, like I think everyone was. I started that because I am totally committed for the rest of my days to helping people wake up, to helping people that are going through the process, because having gone through it, it's not an easy process. There's most likely a dark night of soul attached. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of solitude, a lot of loneliness, and a lot of magic and a lot of beautiful things that happen. But it's not for the faint of heart. And I want to be supporting people that are going through that process. So Wisdom Keeping was a website that I was creating because I have a course that I have called Wisdom Keeping, which I haven't done anything with, which helps people through the process of awakening. And at some point I will get that up. But I don't know what I'm doing with it now. I've shattered my elbow a year ago, actually a year ago last week, and I have a plate and 10 screws in my elbow. I was hiking, and it was one of these life-changing experiences. And that's kind of around when Letting Go by David Hawkins came to me, because I had to let go, because I was in the middle of a bunch of things and I had to stop them all, and I had to just lay down. And within 6 weeks, as it started to heal, I started getting art coming through my hand. And I had wanted to be an artist as a child, but I never did anything about it, because just like my spirituality, I was told, you're not going to be an artist. You have to go to school and become something in the corporate world. And that was it. So I started drawing, and then I started doing art markers, and then I started doing paints. And so as this art has been coming through me, it has been bringing new light codes and new transmissions through that are not only in the process of transforming me, but I think transforming what I'm supposed to do. And Wisdom Keeping is, in my heart, the foundation for everything I will be doing for the rest of my life, which is helping people wake up, and not waking them up, because no one can do that. This is such an inside job. And one of the biggest struggles, I think, with the awakening process for most people is the solitude, because you go from having an outside external experience to all of a sudden being thrust into your internal world where you have no idea what's in there. And you get scared. And so everything I do from now on, which will be the course and the art and everything, is about helping people do that. How that is going to happen now, I am in transition. I want my art to be out there. I want my course to be out there, but I think I'm moving in a direction I don't quite know yet. And I am trusting the currents. And I think many, many people are in the same position. And I want anyone who's going through it, reach out to me, because we're all in this together right now. The world is going in one direction and we're going in another direction. And we have to help and support each other. That those of us that are aware of this process that's happening have to really support each other in any ways that we can. Yeah. So Wisdom Keeping is the kind of the foundation of everything I'm doing, because I'm very much about wisdom. And as an elder now, it's time for me to start giving back all the information and knowledge and the work that I've done in the world, so that maybe the people that are younger than me don't have to fall into the same holes or have the same struggles that I had to go through. So anything that I can do to help that's kind of what my future is. So Wisdom Keeping is part of it, but I'm not quite sure where it's going to go now.
Okay. Well, final question.
Sure.
And we ask this of everybody. Steve Jobs famously gave every attendee at his memorial a copy of Paramahansa's autobiography of a yogi.
Oh.
And we want to know, what book would you want to pass on to your memorial guests?
Interesting. That's really hard. One book? Well, I mean, I think as a human, I think we have to start with the 4 Agreements, because I think we have to really understand our humanity and learn how to treat each other and treat ourselves, because all this energy coming into us, there's a lot of people having all these mystical experiences, but if it's not grounded in our human body and in our humanity, we're not going to be able to get where we want to go. It's going to stay in this etheric realm. So I think I'd want to pass that on.
Okay, that's a good choice.
Yeah.
Very good choice.
Thank you.
Lynnda Pollio, thank you for reminding us that awakening isn't something we chase, it's something we remember.
Yes.
And also to trust what's inside us, speak the unspeakable, and live from the wild intelligence of the heart. And also, we want to thank you for adding your 10 best list of spiritual books.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Book clubs. library. So if you want more information about Lynnda Pollio and her book, Trusting the Currents, you can visit her other website at lyndapollio.com, LYNNDAPOLLIO. If today's conversation sparks your curiosity, you'll love our other two shows, the Synergy Sessions, where leading edge thinkers come together in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities, and Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysteries of consciousness, energy, the hidden layers of reality, and where science converges with spirit in ways you never imagined. I hope you'll join me on those shows too. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 Best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Lynnda Pollio.